Today we've got a great revenge story getting the health department involved. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, dumb boss cut my hours and Koss lost his job. So from the age of 16 to 20, I worked a 24-hour fast food joint. After having worked there for so long, I was very good at what I did, to the point I could handle the entire store by myself as long as I needed, with little to no drops in customer satisfaction or speed. When I was 19, my grandfather got sick, which was really hard because I loved him to bits. My boss and I were close, so we worked out a deal where he would schedule me a ton, and I would essentially be on call for any time he needed someone to cover a shift. I would also work a straight 24-hour shift on Monday, busiest day. Being alone for 8 hours of it, these piled-on hours resulted in me getting around 10 to 15 hours of overtime per week, sometimes more. This actually saved him money, because one guy working for $17 an hour at time and a half was cheaper than paying 3 guys $15 an hour to do the same work, allowing him to make way bigger profits. This allowed him more leeway and rep with corporate, meaning he would get bigger bonuses, and he could give me a raise after around 6 months, citing how well I worked. The other part was that I got a week off a month to visit my grandfather and assist him with his care or anything else I needed, while the extra money allowed for me to help pay for his treatment. Our agreement went on for a year before he was promoted to regional manager, which was a big jump. He got the raise because our store was making like 15% more than the next highest performer while being in a less traveled area. The new manager who took over for him was a piece of crap. My manager told him our deal and he scoffed and said it was dumb because of how much overtime he would be paying me. My boss just shrugged because even if the store's performance dropped, he would just look even better. And so my hours were lowered to like 30 a week, yet he was still calling me in and scheduling me solo 8 hours and full 24-hour shifts. So I was working crap hours but getting paid less. He also stopped the week off a month so I couldn't see my grandfather. So I quit. And he soon realized how freaked he was. As I heard from my boss, the store's profits dropped to 15% lower than the next lowest store in the region rather than district. And the new GM was shortly fired for somehow dropping 125% in profits, and the guy tried to blame me for quitting. Nothing fancy, I just put in my 2-week notice, but I thought it was funny. OP has the thickest fingers and can all by himself plug the hole in the sinking ship, and this boss is still all too eager to pull OP away. That was just about the stupidest analogy I could come up with. Suspicious Tie 7625 wrote, "Why didn't your boss promote you after we got the job as regional manager?" OP responded saying, "Because I was awful at managing others, but great at managing myself. I made shift leader rate, but was only associate because the second I was trying to direct others, it actually became slower." Our next story is Chauvinism? Time to feel very, very stupid. This is a story I was told about a decade ago, so I'd imagine it had happened at least 15 years ago. Background: my mother, a well-respected and kinda well-known lawyer in these parts, who has since become one of the senior partners of her international firm, was head of her department. As such, she was scheduled to meet with a potential big-shot client in order to explain all the whats, hows, and whys the firm could do for his company, and hopefully facilitate the signing of a contract with management. Incident: the big-shot client arrives, my mother's assistant, sort of her second-in-command, a swell guy altogether, welcomes him, conventional pleasantries are exchanged, and they both enter the VIP conference room reserved for, well, big-shot clients. My mother enters shortly after, wishing the client a good time of day. The client, not hesitating for even a second, smiles at her and says something in the lines of, "Could you be a dear and get me a coffee with 1 sugar and cream?" Seeing a woman, the client immediately assumed she must be the secretary. Revenge, my mother, having by then grown accustomed to the inherent gender bias of the corporate world, didn't hesitate either. She put on her biggest smile and in her most accommodating voice said, "Certainly, sir." She walked over to the nearby counter, fixed the man his coffee, brought it to him, asked if there was anything else she could do for him, then proceeded to sit at the head of the table and introduce herself. I wasn't there, but in the words of my mother, throughout the entire meeting, he barely said 3 words and hasn't taken 1 single sip of his coffee. He was too busy being absolutely mortified. I always enjoy remembering this story and imagining the guy's face as the cold embrace of realization hit him. I mean, all things considered, that guy got off pretty darn good. It's not like OP's mom raised a fit. It's not like they called them out or anything. It might affect their job or whatever they're there to do business about. But at least it wasn't like absolutely mortifying, just inwardly mortifying. RSGK wrote, "I love your mother. My mom was pretty and innocent looking, but she had worked in a federal penitentiary. Had had some rough blue-collar jobs, and had gone back to college in her 40s and become a social worker, so she had seen some crap. In her 70s, she went to a new doctor who was condescending. He took her blood pressure and said, 'It's a little high, but that's probably just because you're in the doctor's office, dear.' She looked him dead in the eye and said, 'I don't have white coat syndrome, and don't call me dear.' She told me he turned bright red and sat there giggling nervously for what seemed like a full minute as she continued to stare him down. OP responded to that saying, 'LMAO, he actually thought someone who in the past had dealt with federal prisoners on a daily basis was worked out over him.' Oh my god, I just love this. Absolutely exquisite. Our next story is Revenge at the Playground. I was just the spectator for this, but it gives me such a revenge high that I wanted to share it. We're sitting at the ball field watching our kids play softball, and as what happens at every field complex in America, the younger kids are playing on the playground. The 6 to 7-year-olds are playing some form of dodgeball, but I can't understand the rules. All I know is they're having a blast. They aren't hurting each other, and all the parents can just watch the game in peace while everyone's having a good time. About halfway through the game, a kid around 10 shows up and wants to play too. They let him because they're having fun, and the little turd starts hitting the kids way too hard for their age. He is just beaning them. After the third kid is knocked over by this brat, a parent gets up, comes over to the playground, and asks if the kid could chill a little. The kids are much younger than him and he's hurting them. The little brat says, "It's just the rules of the game. If your kid doesn't want to get hurt, he shouldn't play." I was half thinking this kid was about to get an earful from his mother or she would stop her kid from playing. Instead, she just says, "Okay," turns, walks back to her seat, and whispers something in the kid's ear that's sitting next to her playing on his tablet. The kid, without hesitating, stands up and says, "Hey, can I play?" The little kids are a little weary because the last kid they invited to play started hurting them, but the kid's little brother said yes. The kid came over. He couldn't have been much older than the brat who had come over earlier, maybe a year older or so. Like one might have been 10, the other 11 or 12. They started playing, and the minute the brat had beamed another kid really hard, the older boy says, "Hey, can you cool it a little? We don't want to hurt the little kids." The brat answered, "Shut up and play, it's part of the game." The 12-year-old just said, "Okay." A second later, you hear the loudest smash of the ball. Every parent turned around and the brat is prone on the ground with his face in the dirt. The other kid is standing up from his throwing motion. The prone brat stands up and has dirt down his face where he got knocked over, and he's starting to cry. He takes off running. About 3 minutes later, the kid's mother comes back with the brat and starts asking for the 12-year-old's parents. The mother said, "That would be me. Your kid hit my kid so hard he left a mark. Look," she said as she pulls up his shirt to show her. The mother just said, "Those are the rules of the game. If he doesn't want to get hit, he shouldn't play." The mother of the brat is furious. "Your son is an all-star pitcher. He could have killed my son." The mother of the pitcher says, "My son is an all-star pitcher with outstanding control. He hit your son exactly where he wanted to." The other mother tried to come back, but the other parents and the kids started telling her how her son was starting it by hitting the little kids. After that, it got into a shouting match, and the league commissioner had to come break it up. The brat and the mother eventually left, and about 5 minutes later, the mother bought an ice cream for her all-star pitcher. I could see a moment like this happening in some kind of like comedy TV show. Some brat is being a total bully to the little sibling, so in comes the big kid to sub in. You want to hear those dodgeballs go foom? Tiberius Prime wrote, "I hope all the parents bought him and his mother ice cream." OP responded saying, "I thought the other parents should have gotten involved sooner, but they probably knew what was about to happen." And the mother who originally said something kind of gave off the team mother vibe. The other parents probably did chip in for ice cream because they didn't have to be the bad guy. This next story is Slum Landlord Got What He Deserved. My significant other has a really crappy landlord. I'm talking dealing with the city, debating on suing bad. Basic repairs aren't being completed. I found the property listed on various websites for rental, but get this, the property isn't the same one in the photos. I reported a good chunk of the listings as fraud and claimed to be a person interested in the property doing a drive-by. All of the listings I've reported have been removed online. I'm going to tell my significant other when this slumlord is out of our lives. If this landlord confronts him, my significant other has to look shocked and confused. I mean, if he's a genuine slumlord, chances are he's going to have a number of clientele or renters that are all going to be capable of doing this kind of thing. And shoot, why would this guy think that the people that are actually giving him money are going to be the ones trying to bring him down like that? Cake Fool wrote, "This isn't petty revenge, this is justice." Our next story is beeping your horn at a learner driver. Enjoy your wait. The other day, I pulled up at a set of traffic lights directly behind a learner driver, and another car stopped directly behind me. These lights are notorious in our local area for being very long-winded and only letting 3 to 4 cars through at a time at most. After a minute or so of waiting, our light turned green. Learner driver attempted to pull away and stalled their car. Almost immediately, the car behind me started beeping their horn at the delay. To be fair to the learner, they applied their handbrake, it's on a slight hill, restarted the car, and successfully pulled away on their second attempt just as the light turned back to amber. Anyone who's learned to drive knows the feeling of embarrassment and worry that comes with stalling at the lights, so I felt for that person in front and didn't appreciate the speed at which the person behind started honking their horn. I deliberately hung back, rolling ever so slowly forwards and crossing the line just as the light turned red, forcing the car behind to have to stop. Looking back in my rearview mirror, I could see the other driver gesticulating wildly at me as I drove on home feeling ever so petty. I certainly have a lot of sympathy for first-time drivers or learner drivers as well. If I see somebody that went out of their way to make sure that they have like a bumper sticker that says first-time driver, am I gonna be annoyed when they stall at the light and all of a sudden I have to sit through another light? Sure. Am I gonna be the jerk that flips out and slams the horn and just kinda tries to harass this new driver? I mean, come on, you gotta be better than that. And shoot, the last thing I want is to put any kind of pressure on this learner driver and be some kind of influencing factor into some rash decision and or accident. Siamese Cat 1935 wrote, "I was once behind a new Mustang turning out onto the main road. At first, I was kind of annoyed as it seemed to be taking a long time to go. Then I saw it start and stop. Oops, someone stalled trying to shift, and the passenger side door opened, a man got out, a teenage boy got out of the driver's side, and the dad yelled, 'Sorry, he's learning to drive a stick,' got into the driver's side, and off he went. No biggie once I knew what the issue was. Poor kid looked so embarrassed." This next story is Reeces Revenge. I love Reese's peanut butter cups. I mean, who doesn't, right? And I always keep a stash. Well, my husband got into them, ate them all, jerk. Anyway, that year for Christmas, I got him those huge 2-pack ones. You know, the ones you can basically cut like a pie. I think they're half pounds. Well, he ate the first one and left the other one unattended for several days. So while he was at work, I took a sharp blade knife, cut the bottom out, and ate all the peanut butter out of it. I then melted just enough chocolate to bind it back together. You couldn't even tell that it had been cut. And then I waited. About a week later, he goes to eat it, takes a bite and about bit his tongue because he was expecting for there to be peanut butter in it. He's cursing like, "What?" And I'm just cracking up. Keep your hands off my peanut butter cups, jerk. We all got our guilty pleasures. We all got our snacks that we keep stocks of. My latest one, sour Skittles. They just about make my tongue fall off, but I can't seem to stop coming back to them. I don't even freaking know what I'm doing, wrote. I did something similar with cheese curds. Had a girlfriend think it was adorable to eat off my plate without asking, despite the countless times I told her it was annoying. She went to the bathroom, I pulled the cheese out of 5 of them, filled them with mustard, then sat them closest to her on my plate. Sure enough, she got mad that I sabotaged my own food. Our next story is using boogers for revenge. My brother has always been the favorite, can do little wrong. He would constantly do things like hit me and then scream and claim that I hit him. That was an especially crappy thing to do because this was a house where beatings and severe punishments were regular. There was no way that I would ever get away with doing something like that to him. I had to be clever. We had 2 canvas director's chairs that we would sit in side by side to watch TV. He had his specific chair, and I mine. I began slowly over weeks stealthily picking my nose and wiping it under his chair. There came to be a pretty incredible amount of boogers crusted under the chair. I waited. Our mother discovered the boogers and she was ticked. He tried to blame it on me, but I said it's his chair. Who else would be wiping boogers on it? He got in trouble, and over 30 years later, thinking about it still brings me joy. I never confessed, okay? 1, it was a good revenge. 2, one of the most disgusting revenge stories I've heard in quite a while. Head Pleaser wrote, I came into work really early one morning, went to the break area to get some coffee, and walked in on this guy blowing his nose into the top of the coffee urn. They had 2 of those large, like 30-cup ones in there, usually brewed 2 different ones. I stopped and asked what the freak he was doing, and I'm sure my face showed how disgusted I was seeing him do it. He walked out past me really fast. I dumped out both coffee pots and washed them out, and then also made fresh coffee. I waited, of course, while they finished brewing to get some, just making sure no snot was in them. When I went to go confront him again at his desk, he wasn't there. I heard later on that morning he had walked out quitting, and I'd already told just about everyone I knew that drank coffee about it. This next story is, you want to keep driving through my property? I'll make it so you can't drive. A few years ago, my partner and I purchased a block of land that we were planning on leveling and building our forever home on. But due to rising building costs, we have unfortunately had to hold off building at this point and have been utilizing the space as a dog run/chill point as we have both ocean and mountain views. About 6 months ago, we started to notice tire tracks running through our property from one side all the way to the other, always the same path taken. So we now have 2 beautiful deep tire tracks on our property. Awesome. No worries, we popped up a fence to deter the people from driving through. Yep, they drove through the fence. We would put it back up, and the very next time we would go out there, the fence was driven through again. At this point, this has been going on for about 6 months, and during that time, we decided to stop mowing the lawn. You know, hopefully make it a bit more challenging for them to drive through. Nope, continues to drive through. No worries, we'll just keep it growing, love the look, plus bonus points for not having to worry about maintenance. The other great thing about long grass is you can hide all kinds of things there. And since it's our property that we're just leaving bare, we can obviously start storing some goods on there, like metal star pickets. They also sit in the ground on just the right angle to puncture your radiator if you try to drive through it without knowing it's there. The last time I visited our property, there's some nicely bent star pickets strewn about. Some that had been snapped clean and a few that had been very clearly thrown in anger. Turns out, tow trucks make big grooves in grass. I mean, the beautiful thing about revenge stories like this is they can't go and call the cops and say, oh, they put these metal pickets on this property that I'm trespassing on. There would just be too big of a question of, why are you here to begin with, sir? Whittling Can Be Fatal wrote, there's someone's 4x4 buried in a corner of my family ranch. Over the years, a number of natural obstacles were put up to discourage off-roaders. In addition, the U.S. Park Service had put up signs warning the ground is unstable due to old mines. The signs also warn of a substantial fine and possible jail time for trespassing. One time, someone contacted the ranch manager asking if they could bring a crane onto our land to recover the Jeep that had fallen into a mine. The ranch manager asked words to the effect, "Are you admitting to trespassing?" That pretty much ended the conversation. The Jeep has stayed where it is, and natural erosion has left it as a mystery for future archaeologists to puzzle over. Our next story is B-Jerk Get Smaller Bonus. At my old job, my manager was always petty with me because I refused to do overtime or cover sickness. So they would always give me terrible shifts or split my contract over the maximum number of days. I had a small contract when studying, and it could have been done over 2 long days, and there were weeks where I was getting 5 4-hour shifts, which is awful when studying. If we ever worked together, they wouldn't even speak to me on shift. We sat like 2 feet from each other. We had silly weekly KPI targets that would dictate the manager's bonus they would receive every quarter. Since I wasn't too fussed about the job and I only had a couple of years left studying, so I started failing one of these KPIs every shift and blamed it on a technical problem or just forgetfulness. It wasn't enough for me to be fired, but it did affect their bonus. They later got moved to a different area, and my new manager was lovely and always hit the KPIs. I never did find out how much they lost, but I still feel good about it. All I can really say is they kind of made it really easy for this kind of thing to happen to them. And really, I guess that's why they call it a bonus, right? You suck at your job, including getting your workers to do adequate work. Really, there's no bonus to be had. This next story is, you won't take my complaint seriously? I'll call the health department. Okay, so this happened about a year or so ago. I, 19, female to male, lived paycheck to paycheck at the time due to only being able to work part-time due to my disability. Now 21, still part-time at another job with more hours, but still managing to scrape by. So I would frequently shop at a store in our area that would claim to help your wallet out. It really didn't sometimes, but if you knew where to look, the store lived up to its slogan name. Here lies the issue. This store is also somewhat known for sometimes not rotating stock properly, thus you may get goods that are out of date. For certain items, no biggie. Others, no. I lived with my sister at this time, and once we had gotten meat that was expired by 6 months, and we hadn't noticed till we had gotten home. We were so frustrated that we called ahead of time and then went and asked for a refund. We were more wary after that. A couple weeks after, I decided to buy yogurt from them. The single-serve cups because I wanted a snack. It was still within its best by date, and I was excited, only to be revolted when I got home to open it and see mold growing on top in the corner. What the heck? Immediately I called the store. They asked if I wanted a refund and to bring in the product and my receipt. I said no, it was barely $1 yogurt. I wanted to let them know it had mold and give them the batch so they could be aware and do what they needed. Now, what I can remember was them saying this: I can speak to my manager and let them know about the complaint, but if you don't want a refund, there's not much we can do. You have to call corporate. This wasn't a complaint, in my opinion, it was a valid health concern, especially considering prior incidents. What if the other containers had mold and someone didn't notice and got sick? I myself am disabled and could have gotten deathly ill if I'd consumed the mold due to my slow digestive system, and at the time I had a GJ tube for gastroparesis. Can I speak to your manager actually? I hated that I asked that, but they obliged without much fuss, thankfully. But while he gave me his business email to give a copy of my complaint, he said the same about calling corporate. Could I have called the actual company who made the yogurt? Well, fun fact, the store makes the yogurt brand, so that's actually the corporate office. It was the same phone number for complaints for products, thankfully, as I made sure to check. But I digress. I called corporate, filed a complaint, gave the batch number, submitted my photos, and waited. I waited a week. I also had emailed the manager of the store with a complaint for his side with no response. I expected that. By this time, I went back to the store for something else. I think some bottled water. I glance at the yogurt just by curiosity, and what do I see? The same dang yogurt. Same dates, same batch numbers, same everything. By this time, the yogurts were days out of date. In my opinion, they should have been rotated out and clearanced day of or the day before their best by date, but to still have them a week later, especially when a customer has complained of finding mold? Something just snapped. I know corporate business takes a while to process, but the website had said it was resolved within like half the time after I made the complaint. Yet the person on the phone had sounded concerned, but something along the chain of the report, it didn't stick. So obviously someone didn't care, but I knew who would. I pulled out my phone, I took pictures of the yogurt on the shelves and proof of the date they were taken and some other things I believe too I found. I went home and found pictures of the 6-month expired meat. They had timestamps too. Do you know how fast you can find your local county health department? Fairly quick with the right keywords. You can also sometimes find the public routine inspections. Theirs were meh, but it looked like they were due for a new one, so a quick email was all it took, explaining how corporate wasn't really responding or taking it serious, the store wasn't taking it seriously, and the violations I had experienced. I attached all the images I had collected. I paused. Maybe corporate hadn't told the store to pull it yet? No. Their store is known for being lax on rotating stock and taking complaints with a grain of salt. I hit send. I do remember vividly that within 3 days, I had an email from the manager of the store. Shocking. He did get my email then. He was offering a refund on the yogurt again, but this time without needing my receipt. Apologizing for the inconvenience that the experience had for me, basically, which was wild in my opinion. I didn't respond. I didn't want a refund. I told them that. But the next time I was brave enough to go in about a day later, the yogurt had been restocked completely, as well as other things that I'd mentioned in my report, like the meats. Now I rarely see anything past a few days, if that. They've become smarter at marking stuff down too. Now it really does help our wallet sometimes. Edit, I likely won't be saying the store name publicly as I don't want to be in any legal trouble, but it's not Smart and Final or any of those. The store I'm talking of, their slogan is their name. Save your wallet a bunch, so to speak. I don't even really think this is revenge. I think OP's just doing the right thing, not just for them, but for anybody else that's going to go to this place. I know it's like, a budget store or whatnot, a place where you're supposed to save money. Doesn't mean you can skimp and serve 6-month-old expired meat or moldy yogurt. Next firefighter 4667 wrote, I had a similar experience, but this was happening with half of the product, but mostly baby food and juice of all things. It was a continuing problem for about a year. I tried every avenue. They were the only available store in a 40-mile area, so I feel like they thought they could get away with it. They were already charging double what the other stores were. So I emailed the health department, got a response the next day saying they set up a random inspection. I only shop there when absolutely necessary, but I haven't found a single expired item since. Our next story is, I used to secretly watch TV shows in advance behind the back of my husband. This happened/was happening over the course of some time 2 years ago. So my husband, 32-year-old male, and I, 30-year-old female, loved watching shows together. When I find something interesting, I cannot stop myself and turn into a couch potato until I finish this stuff. I go so fast through the stuff, but find it extremely boring to rewatch. My husband is more easygoing and a couple of episodes here, couple of episodes there type of guy. This was spanning over a couple of months. I would cheat. I would cheat on our agreement and just continue watching after he falls asleep and go deep into early hours. Tomorrow I would have to, sadly, rewatch same episodes while pretending like I never seen them. After I've seen like whole 4 or 5 seasons of a show, I would lose interest. But we would still be early into the 2nd season. My loss of interest would spread like a plague on my husband and we would often just drop a show. After a time I realized I was being a bad partner with such a petty backstabbing. I needed to change, so I stopped doing that. A few months ago, I admitted to my husband what I was actively doing back in the day. He said he knew. It wasn't a big deal. Well, he changed his mind and decided there should be repercussions, and The Walking Dead is perfect. He's seen like 5 seasons, while I've dropped the series in mid-10th season. Since then, he would mention here and there how he would like to continue, but I was always against. It's too long. Since we watched The Walking Dead a long time ago, and he doesn't really remember the details, we had to start from the pilot episode. So now I'm stuck with rewatching such a long butt series. He particularly enjoys parts where I'm visibly bored and would wake me up if I start falling asleep. Serves me right. So the only consolation I have for OP in this is the pilot season for The Walking Dead is really good and probably just about the best one. I heard it's a lot better binge watching, but I watched The Walking Dead on release for a number of years. In my opinion, season 7 is where it became a true slog. Vox289 wrote, luckily with all the spin-offs, Fear the Walking Dead, Dead City, etc., there only, as of today, are 25 total seasons and 335 episodes. It should fly by. I'd like to note my wife does something similar to me. We're both in the living room after dinner and she throws something on to watch for her. I'm starting to watch a bit and I'm like, hey, this is interesting, I want to watch too. And she's halfway through season 3 and I force restarting it, Bridgerton most recently, so I can catch up. Before I get flamed, she can watch whatever she wants solo. She works from home more than I do. Watches TV on her iPad at her desk or in the bath, etc. But if it's on in the living room when we're both in there, then it needs to be agreeable to both. I've certainly had to stop watching Halo or The Mandalorian because solo TV time became family TV time after dinner, and it wasn't a show she was into, so fair is fair. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another awesome revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.